Hello and good evening to our Bible study today on October 6th, and today we're going to take a final look at the Christianity in the early times and especially the shift that now happens. The last two times we talked about the persecution of Christians and how Christianity got pushed to the brink, even on the brink of extinction, and on a tiny scale how that got prevented in the year 311 after Christ under the Emperors Decius and Valerian, who wanted to really push hard on Christianity and basically got it to be illegal and almost extinct. Now, we also heard that at the end, the son of the emperor declared that Christianity is no longer persecuted in the year 311, and it got declared a religio licita again, which is a Roman standard for a tolerated religion, a religion that is tolerated by the Roman Empire. It doesn't have to follow all of the rules of sacrificing for the emperor in the Roman sense. Now, the most important event politically in the early church is the so-called Constantinian shift. And this is gonna pave the way for Christianity to begin basically its political victory march through the next 2,000 years of history. Emperor Constantine, this is the one where the Constantinian shift is named after. It describes the way when Christianity becomes a state religion. Now, it can't be really attributed to exactly one event, but it's more that we call the entire time after 311 as the so-called Constantinian shift. So over the course of decades, the church, or the Christian church, will replace the Roman Catholic cult, the Roman cultus, not the Catholic, the Roman cult, and abolish the gods and establish itself as the new religion. Christianity becomes more and more the salus publica, and this is the Latin word for the well-being of the state instead of the Roman pantheon. It becomes the religion that most people have to follow or think they have to follow because otherwise the empire is at risk. So beforehand, everybody was basically free to worship their own religions as long as they still worshipped the Roman emperor gods. So Zeus, Jupiter, Mars, all of these kind of gods, because they were there for the well-being of the empire, and you do not want to be on the angry side of these gods. And what we're going to see is over the time that Christianity is going to take that place as salus publica, as a religion that is good for the general well-being of the empire. This is important to note because in that, Christianity becomes a lot more appealing to a lot of different people. The most important person that we can, however, point down is Emperor Constantine, who used Christianity very cleverly in personal conviction and more for political tactics. Yes, he does convert to Christianity, but he only does it at the end of his lifespan. Beforehand, he uses Christianity in a political sense and uses it as a political bargaining chip, and we're going to see why. Emperor Constantine I, also sometimes called Emperor Constantine the Great, he is emperor between the years 306 and 337. And this is a huge deal since before we saw that in 30 years they had 28 different emperors. Now we have a time of stability where we have one emperor for almost 30 years. And this is for over 30 years. This is a huge deal. Back then people didn't get as old. The average life expectancy was between 40 to 45 years at best. And so having an emperor for that long of a time gives an emperor really a lot of political power to actually change things. So Emperor Constantine, he is born as a rich, privileged man born to a general, and from the very beginning, he tells historians later on, he felt that he was personally chosen by a god and had a task to fulfill for God or for the gods and to lead people. Now in the very beginning, Constantine is very unsure about which god it actually is, and it's changing throughout his time of youth. But he develops a connection to Christianity. He never officially converts to Christianity until the day he dies. On his deathbed, in the year 337, he gets baptized. So he doesn't officially become a Christian until the very last, legends say, seconds of his life. But he always has a deep connection to Christianity. Now, how deep that is on a faith level, we do not know. But we know that it's more on a political level for inspiring. There is a big legend when it comes to Emperor Constantine, and this is what later on a lot of people will say this is the turning point in how the general population perceives Christianity. It wasn't as much a turning event for Constantine, it was more a turning event for the people that followed him. And this is the fight in the Battle of the Milvian Bridge, and that's 312. So this battle, there are two emperors, basically. There's another emperor that's in the east, that's Maxentius, and basically Maxentius and Constantine are fighting over who is the emperor of the Roman Empire. And technically, all of the cards are held by Maxentius. He is the current emperor, he is reside in Rome, he has a bigger army, and he has a more strategic position. He burned down the bridge of Milvia before, and the only way going into Rome is through that bridge. And so he makes one fatal mistake. Instead of fighting Constantine from the safety of Rome, a city that is easily defended, he wants to have an open fight, and Constantine will win that fight, even with less troops. And the legend that goes according to this is a legend that he had a vision the night before the battle. He had a vision that allegedly an angel tells him that he needs to put the sign of Christ on every single one of his soldiers' shields. And what he has put on the shield is an X and an R. So Hero, which is the Greek sign for Jesus Christ. So this sign he puts on the shields in big things, and underneath he writes in letters in Hoc signo vinces, which means translated, in this sign you shall conquer. So it is clear that Constantine uses religion, in this case Christianity, to not only bolster the morale of the troops, but also when he wins the battle, it makes sure that it becomes a legend. And a lot of the soldiers and a lot of the population see this as a direct sign of God, an intervention of God, that somebody who has such a tiny army can win against such a big opponent. Again, this plays more into the role of Christianity being the religion that more and more people think they have to follow in order for the realm and for the Roman Empire to flourish. So after this victory, Emperor Constantine defeats Maxentius, and he is now the Emperor of Rome. And what he does, it has a lot of consequences. He wins with such a smaller army. A lot of the positiveness for Christianity is coming. People are talking about a miracle again. And there are even groups that are seeing another Messiah in Emperor Constantine, now a powerful political figure. He himself sees himself still acknowledged as this personal warrior of God, and now we can see that he develops a deep connection to the Christian God. Now after this vision, it becomes clear that he is going to be this personal fighter warrior for God. But still in his own belief, he believes that he is chosen, especially by God, to lead the people. When he enters Rome, it was custom for the victors to go to the Roman capital and sacrifice to the gods. In the Roman capital, all of the pantheon of the Roman gods were there. Emperor Constantine is the very first emperor in centuries that breaks with this tradition. Instead, he goes and celebrates a worship for God, for the Christian God. And this marks a huge landmark because it gives the general people the sign that this victory did not come from the Roman gods, but instead came from the Christian God. And so this got a lot of people, again, also interested in this religion. It cannot be overstated how big of an influence all of this really is, especially with Christianity coming out of the years 303 to 311, where Christianity was pushed to the brink of extinction with the persecutions, with public propaganda and ridicule. Now this is a complete shift around, and it fits well into the message of the Christians. The Son of God, Jesus Christ, who has this big message, gets rejected, gets killed, and then has his battle with death and wins against death and resurrection. And now you have another person who is outnumbered, wins the fight, and now claims victory over this. The parallels that people are drawing are very, very clear. And this gives Christianity a huge, huge boost, as well as now having the emperor of the Roman Empire being not an official member, but being very close to the Roman religion. Now, immediately after Constantine takes the Roman Empire, he initiates a bunch of new policies. A lot of them come because there's political unrest in the East. Maxentius came from the East, and now there are still people that are loyal to him from the East. The new emperor in there is Licinius, and they, after much unrest, sign a treaty in the year 313. And this treaty is just a beginning of the many policies that Constantine will introduce. It had three main points: to give back this time of peace in the East, which is religious freedom for Christians in the empire. So there's no longer a persecution, now it's truly religious freedom. Money and possessions that were seized in persecutions before had to be given back. And this is a huge thing, because now finally they can have their churches, their congregations, they can go back again. And the church had to be acknowledged as an official institution. This is also really big, because now it belongs within the Roman apparatus of their organization. The church now has a place in there, which is huge. But this treaty doesn't hold the peace for long. In the following year, Constantine and Licinius are always disagreeing on how the empire needs to be reformed. They are fighting and tensions are rising. And it ends in a war. And that war is 324. So about a decade after the battle at the Milvian Bridge, there is another war, this time Constantine against Licinius. And again, Constantine is winning, and this is now truly solidifying his position as somebody where God is with him, and that he's a true fighter for Christianity, of the Christian God. Now with so many victories that Constantine can boast about different people that follow different gods, it became clear to the people that Constantine is the one where God is on the side, and that is usually the correct side to be on. Immediately after he issues a new decree, and that goes through the entirety of the realm of Roman Empire. Christianity is now fully seen as the religion that ensures victory and is fully responsible for salus publica. That means it is the only religion that people should worship for the stability and well-being of the emperor and of empire itself, so ultimately also for them. Since people didn't want the empire to fail and they wanted their soldiers to come home, a lot of them adopted Christianity as a following of that. So it took basically 1 decade, 2 decisive victories by Emperor Constantine, and the continuous push of his administration to declare Christianity the main religion. Constantine's victory over the heathen forces was proven that God is powerful in this. And as a result, Constantine is officially calling all his subjects to convert to Christianity. However, in the beginning, he does not force them. If people want to stay with the Roman pantheon or with different religions, they can. However, they're heavily incentivized to do so, since it is the religion of the emperor and of the entire empire. With this state reform that happens, the Emperor Constantine also instates a new privilege reform for the church itself. So in the beginning it was more restorative, that the church got restored. Now the church possessions were given back, and even more. Bishops, clergy that were before in exile or in jail are now getting free. They're coming back. the clergy itself get freed from taxes, so there's no more monetary burden on people. Clergy, and this is a huge one, no longer falls under Roman court jurisdiction. That means they cannot be persecuted for whatever crime they would commit. They are basically given immunity, and this is a huge deal. Donations can now be officially made to the church, and through testaments, through last wills, and the Roman Empire even instates and tasks the church with instating a new administration that is church-led but financed by the Romans, by the Roman Empire, to care for the poor and for the homeless. With that, Christianity and the Christian church becomes an integral part of the Roman Empire. And this also means it has now a lot more influence in politics. It's no longer just a religion that is very powerful, but now, or with the population, but now is directly influencing politics. One of those consequences, what we see, is that death penalty of crucifixion gets abolished, mainly out of respect, since the crucifixion was the death penalty for Jesus Christ. It now gets abolished. So this is just one sign how deep church already is interwoven in the Roman Empire. And a little bit of forward. In the following years, Constantine will introduce more restrictive policies towards other religions. So the Roman Empire, cultus, the Pantheon, the Jewish religion, all of these religions are now getting put under a lot more distress. Officially, it is still completely legal to belong to any other different religion. However, if you do not belong to Christianity, the repercussions are very dire. You get taxed more. Churches are not allowed to build their buildings of worship anymore if they are not Christian. So a lot of these rules are really made to give Christianity a huge privilege and to basically push out all of the other religions. The Roman legionaries, the soldiers, all of them are needed to be sworn to Christianity, since Christianity has the God of victory on the side. So all of these are reasons why why Christianity becomes so big. Other religions were not able to build sanctuaries, churches, and over the next couple decades we're going to see that Christianity is going to become the main religion, mainly because all of the other churches are being starved out of their buildings, out of their clergy, out of money, and out of support from the Roman Empire. And Christianity had a lot of internal theological fights. I said it, the repercussions of the persecution were huge, since there were a lot of people, the Lapsi, people that fell off from Christianity. Now, when we go back to the persecutions, how could you prove somebody is a Christian or not? There were not official documents for it. So the normal test that they did is they gave people an image of Jesus Christ and they asked them to trample on it, spit on it, ridicule that image, and then sacrifice to the Roman gods. People who did this as Christians were called Lapsi. They fell from their faith. Now that Christianity is in a much better place, it is legal, it is the main religion, the question that remained was, how does the church deal with people that save their lives by making fun or by ridiculing or denouncing their faith? And this was a huge discussion that was going on, and the church was at the brink of separating over these issues. There were powerful parties that were all having their own different ideas, sponsored by a lot of different people. And the one thing that Emperor Constantine did not want was a schism, a splitting of the church. In order for the Roman Empire to continue to flourish, the church needed to be united as the main state religion. Constantine could not allow for the church to have an internal conflict. So what he did, and this is super new and unique, is he started to get involved in this theological problem. And this is a huge turning point again. Until then, we saw the church and the church and state were operating first individual. Now they were getting introduced in the state apparatus. And now the state, namely the emperor, has an official interest in theology of the church. And his decision will be that there will be one church. All of the contrary factors or bishops or other groups and parties were exiled and were declared a heresy. They were declared a heresy by a bishops' conference, but they were heavily backed by the Roman Emperor Constantine. And this is a huge deal. It makes it something, it is very different if it would just be a church that declares something a heresy, or if it is the entire Roman Empire that declares something heresy as the Roman state. With that, we now have an involvement from state into the church, not only on a structural level, but also on a theological level. And this is the turning point in Christian history. Christianity came from the beginning of a small sect that was made illegal and persecuted to the brink of extinction, is now heavily involved in not only the Roman state apparatus, but also with the Roman emperor. We're going to continue to see that Emperor Constantine is making theological arguments and decisions throughout his entire lifetime until he dies. In the aftermath, it becomes a tradition that most Roman emperors that sit on the throne are also heavily invested in Christian theology. And in that, the entirety of the Christian church and the politics of this time will be heavily interwoven with each other. And this creates the following rise of the Christian church in such a heavy state way for the next 1500 years. So for 1500 years, almost until the end of the 1800s, so not just 200 years ago, the church was heavily influential in every single decision that was made in the state. And the state was at first trying to mingle with church theology, and at one point it became clear that the church is more powerful. So that we have this clear separation between church and state is relatively new, and it's not the norm throughout the length of the church's history. Our history as Christians is one that came with blood through the martyrs, and then became one that is heavily on the side of the rich and powerful with the leadership of the world. And now I think the church is still trying to find their own place in the world that is separated from the state, but still within the state. And this is where we as church have to think very clearly, what is it that we demand from a state, and with what backbone can we do this? We come from a history of over 1500 years of the church being able to steer a state and the state steering the church. Now with us being separated, the question that we have to answer in the 21st century is, how can we as church be a church not only for all people, but also what is our stand within a different state system as a church of Christians throughout the entire world. Christianity is not a nationality, and Christianity is not defined by state borders. However, our life is defined by nationality and by state borders. And how can we as Christians live without this? All of these are questions that were never asked in the beginning, since the church was so powerful. Now with the separation, these are questions that we as modern day Christians have to answer. This was our very long trip for 3 Bible studies with not that much Bible text, but importance why the Bible still has some meaning today, and especially what meaning it held throughout the entirety of Christian history. These were just the early days on the Christian rise to power. And I want to show this to really show that we can understand where do we as Christians come from, and for us to understand when we now look at the later letters of Paul, at the later letters of the Bible, where does this whole idea of suffering for faith come from? Because most of these letters that we're going to take a look at the next couple Bible studies will be written during or after the time of the persecution of Christians. And I wanted to show how big of a change Christianity had to undergo. At first being tolerated and persecuted, and then becoming basically the state religion. All of this will be reflected in the Bible text that we're going to take a look at the next time. But this was our Bible study for today. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to meet next Tuesday again at 7 o'clock on our YouTube channel with letters from the New Testament about this time. Until then, I hope you all stay healthy and safe, and I hope you have a great week. Take care and God's blessings. Goodbye.